Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever found yourself wondering about, glimpses of the future, or maybe messages that seem to come from somewhere beyond the ordinary?
It's definitely a concept that's gripped people for, well, millennia.
Absolutely. Sparking wonder, driving whole movements, shaping cultures all over the globe. It's huge.
And today, our deep dive is all about that prophecy.
That's right. Our mission really is to journey through this pretty comprehensive collection of sources. We've gathered articles, research, your notes,
hmm
to explore prophecy across different cultures, religions, maybe even some scientific perspectives.
Yeah, the aim is to dig up some surprising facts, hopefully gain a more nuanced understanding of this, well, incredibly multifaceted thing.
Exactly. We'll look at what it is, where we find it, how people interpret it.
And maybe what it could mean for you.
Yeah.
Whether you're coming at this as a believer, a skeptic, or just plain curious.
So to kick us off, the big question. When we talk about prophecy, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, the general idea from the sources is it's a message communicated to a person, the prophet,
Right.
by some kind of supernatural entity. And that message might contain divine will or law or maybe, preternatural knowledge, like future events.
Often through visions or direct interaction, yeah.
Exactly. Visions, voices, that sort of thing. And the word itself, prophecy, it comes via Old French from the Greek prophetia,
Meaning.
essentially the gift of interpreting the will of God, or maybe just the function of a prophet.
Okay. But what strikes me immediately is just how varied the understanding of prophecy has been. It's really not a one-size-fits-all idea, is it?
Oh, not at all. Take someone like Maimonides, the Jewish philosopher. He had a very specific take.
Right. What was his view?
He saw it as an emanation sent forth by divine being through the medium of the active intellect.
Okay, hang on. Active intellect. What did he mean by that, for those of us not up on medieval philosophy?
Right, good point. It's basically this idea of a cosmic intelligence, a kind of universal mind that acts as a conduit, sort of channeling divine knowledge to the human mind. First to our logical side, then to our imagination. That's how we receive and interpret the messages.
Interesting. So a very intellectual process, almost.
In a way, yes. And interestingly, it's quite close to Al-Farabi's theory of prophecy in Islam.
Okay. Now, contrast that with, say, the Old Testament prophets.
hmm
They often delivered what the sources call conditional warnings, right?
Exactly. Much more direct, often.
Yep.
Like, repent of sin X, otherwise consequence Y is going to happen.
So less of a fixed future, more like a divine if-then statement. That really changes the dynamic, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
What's the significance of that conditionality, do you think?
Well, it really emphasizes human choice,
Yeah.
agency. It suggests the future isn't totally set in stone. It can be changed by what people do, especially by repentance.
Right. Then you have St. Paul, who talked about edification, exhortation, and comfort.
Yeah, focusing much more on the sort of community building aspects, how prophecy helps people.
And the Catholic Encyclopedia. It defined it pretty strictly as foreknowledge of future events.
Primarily, yes, but it also kind of stretched the definition to include knowing past events no one remembers or hidden things happening right now that reason can't figure out.
Okay. And Western esotericism.
Yeah,
You mentioned Rosemary Guiley.
right. She connects clairvoyance as something that often goes along with divination, prophecy, and magic, sort of part of the same toolkit.
Of course, we have to acknowledge not everyone buys into prophecy. There's a skeptical view, too,
Absolutely. A big one is the idea of vaticinium ex eventu,
which is Latin for.
prophecy written after the fact.
Mhm.
The argument is that some prophecies weren't predictions at all. They were just written after something happened to make it look like it was predicted.
I see. Like historical fiction presented as foresight.
Kind of. And it's worth remembering, even ancient texts like the Jewish Torah deal with the idea of the false prophet. So people have been aware of potential deception or just getting it wrong for a very long time.
Okay, so with all these definitions and this skepticism in mind,
Yeah.
this is where it's really interesting, right? Looking at how prophecy actually shows up in different belief systems globally.
It really does. Let's start with the Baha'i faith.
Oh.
Its founder, Baha'u'llah,
Uh-huh.
declared himself in 1863 to be the promised messianic figure, a manifestation of God. He described these profound mystical experiences, particularly a vision he had while imprisoned in Iran.
What happened in the vision?
He recounted meeting the maid of heaven, kind of a representation of the divine, who told him about his mission, promised him divine help. This was really foundational for the faith, a core prophetic moment.
Okay, and then there's that really captivating story from Buddhism you mentioned
hmm
in the Silla Kingdom.
Oh, yeah, this is quite something. It's from around 527 CE. The king, Beofeng, wanted Buddhism as the state religion, but his officials were resisting.
Right.
So his grand secretary, Ichidan, comes up with this incredibly bold plan. He tells the king to issue the order, then deny it publicly. Ichidan would then confess to forging it.
Right, you take the fall.
Exactly, except execution. But, and here's the prophecy, he predicted that at his execution, a miracle would happen that would convince everyone.
Wow, that's high stakes. Did it work? What happened?
Amazingly, yes. The sources say when he was executed, the earth shook, the sun went dark, flowers rained down.
No way.
His severed head flew off to the sacred mountains, and this is the detail everyone remembers, milk, not blood, sprayed like 100 feet into the air from his body.
Milk. Goodness.
I know. And apparently this collection of omens was enough. The court was convinced, saw it as heaven's approval, and boom, Buddhism became the state religion that year.
That's an incredible example of prophecy shaping history. So from these dramatic moments, let's turn to Christianity. It seems to have a really complex, evolving relationship with prophecy.
It certainly does. Early on, you had figures like Justin Martyr arguing that prophets weren't just in Israel anymore, they were in the church.
Yeah.
And other texts, like the Shepherd of Hermas and writers like Irenaeus, confirmed these spiritual gifts, including prophecy, were still active.
But there was controversy too, right? Like with Montanus.
Yes, but interestingly, the issue with Montanus in the 2nd century wasn't really about whether prophecy existed. It was more about how he prophesied, his ecstatic style, and some of the specific doctrines he taught. The gift itself wasn't the main point of contention for many.
Got it. And fast forward to more modern times.
Well, you have the Azusa Street Revival, 1904 to 1906 in LA. It's basically seen as the birthplace of Pentecostalism.
Known for speaking in tongues and prophecy.
Exactly. Both Pentecostals and the wider charismatic movement today strongly believe that these gifts, like prophecy, have been restored to the church. They're active now.
So prophecy went from being maybe individual messages to more communal, experiential things within Christianity?
In many ways, yes. And some denominations see it as absolutely central. The Seventh-day Adventist Church, for instance.
How so?
They believe the gift of prophecy, especially seen in the writings of Ellen G. White, is a key identifying mark of what they call the remnant church. And you have groups like the Neo-Pentecostal Church of God Ministry of Jesus Christ International. They practice prophecy through laying on of hands, giving people individual messages about, say, future promises from God.
And the apostolic prophetic movement? How do they define it?
For them, prophecy is very much about delivering a specific word inspired by the Holy Spirit that communicates God's current thoughts and intention. It's very direct.
Okay, so from those diverse Christian views, it feels like a natural jump to the Latter-day Saint movement. Prophecy isn't just part of their story, it's foundational, right? How does their idea of a living prophet change things?
It's absolutely central. The movement starts with Joseph Smith claiming he was visited by God and Jesus in 1820 and that he received direct communication from God many times after that.
And translating the Book of Mormon.
Right, supposedly from gold plates, under divine inspiration. Then, after his murder in 1844, there was a big split over who should succeed him.
The succession crisis. Brigham Young versus Joseph Smith III.
Exactly, leading to different branches. But the main body today, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, believes their president right now, that's Russell M. Nelson, is literally a living prophet.
So receiving ongoing revelation.
Yes, continuing revelation. Things published in their Doctrine and Covenants, for example. And they have other prophecies, too, like the White Horse prophecy about a future war in the U.S. This idea of a continuous, active, modern-day prophet is key.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears to Islam. How is prophecy understood there?
Well, the Arabic term is Nubia. You have Nabi, which means a prophet or lawgiver, and Rasul, a messenger who brings divine revelation, usually via an angel.
And knowing the prophets is important in Islam.
It's fundamental. Knowledge of the Islamic prophets, which includes figures like Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and crucially Muhammad as the final prophet, is one of the 6 core articles of Islamic faith.
Does the Quran itself contain prophecy?
Muslims believe so, yes. There are verses thought to predict events years before they happened, like one saying, "Every destined matter has a set time to transpire, and you will soon come to know."
How do they view prophecies in other scriptures, like the Bible?
They generally accept the validity of prophecies in earlier scriptures, recognizing the prophets. However, the belief is that while the Quran is God's uncorrupted word, parts of texts like the Bible have been altered or corrupted over time.
Okay. And finally, let's wrap up the religious section with Judaism, an incredibly rich foundational tradition when it comes to prophets.
Absolutely. The Hebrew word navi literally means spokesperson, someone who speaks for God to the people, but also for the people to God.
And the role evolved.
Scholars like Sigmund Mowinckel suggest a distinction between early seers, maybe more focused on divination, and later ecstatic prophets, involving Nebiism, sort of intense spiritual experiences. These functions eventually merged.
Is prophecy still considered active in Judaism?
Traditional Jewish belief generally holds that Nevuah prophecy in its highest form largely ceased after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. Malachi is often seen as the last prophet whose words were recorded in the Tanakh.
And like we mentioned earlier, they also address the false prophet.
Yes, the Torah has specific laws about it, showing there were clear standards for what counted as authentic. And those prophecies themselves, often they were those conditioned warnings we talked about.
Right, consequences for disobedience.
And conditioned promises for obedience, follow the instructions, receive blessings.
And Maimonides again.
Yeah.
He had more to say.
Oh, yes. He had a very detailed philosophical view. He saw prophecy on a spectrum, different levels.
Not so.
From Moses at the very top, experiencing direct, vivid encounters, down to maybe Noah, who could grasp God's will but maybe couldn't articulate it fully. He even outlined 12 specific modes of prophecy, ranging from subtle inspired actions to full-on audiovisual revelations.
Wow. Complex stuff.
Definitely. And it's important to note, even within the Jewish scriptures, prophetic experience wasn't limited just to Jews or the Hebrew language. It suggests a kind of universal potential.
Okay, so we've journeyed through these major religious frameworks, but prophecy also pops up outside of them, or in ways that are harder to categorize, right?
Yeah.
What about explanations that don't involve the divine?
Exactly. Let's look beyond those traditional structures. For instance, Native American prophecy.
Which can be tricky to study?
It can be, yeah, because it's primarily based on oral traditions. The knowledge is often held and passed down by elders. But there are recorded examples, like 3 dog-rib prophets in Canada who claimed divine inspiration to bring Christianity to their people, using specific dances and trance states.
Interesting. And in China?
In China, you have prophetic texts known as Chen. Probably the most famous examples are the I Ching, the Book of Changes, used for divination for millennia, and the Tu Bei Tu, a collection of cryptic verses and images said to predict China's future.
And then there's the name everyone knows, Nostradamus. How does he fit in? Or does he?
Nostradamus. Michel de Nostradam published Les Prophéties in 1555. Famously cryptic, esoteric quatrains.
Supposedly from a crystal ball.
That's the story. But, and this is a big but, most academic sources are pretty clear. The links people make between his verses and world events are usually based on, well, shaky ground.
How so?
Misinterpretations, often really loose ones, sometimes mistranslations, maybe even deliberate ones. Or the connections are just too vague, too tenuous. There's really no solid evidence anyone's ever used his writings to specifically predict an event before it happened.
So his fame is more about finding patterns after the fact.
Largely, yes. It seems to tap into that very human desire to find meaning and order, especially in hindsight.
Okay, so if we're stepping away from divine explanations, what do the skeptical or psychological viewpoints offer? How do they try to account for this whole phenomenon?
Well, the straightforward skeptical explanations point to things like coincidence, sheer chance, or the vagueness we had just talked about, prophecies so broad they could fit almost anything.
And that post-addiction idea again.
Exactly, writing it after the fact. There's also an interesting point from Bill Whitcomb, who wrote about magic. He noted that just making a prophecy can actually change the probability of the event happening.
How?
Well, people might act differently because of it. And how accurate it seems can be warped by what the seer or the listeners want to believe. Plus, the simple statistical reality. Make enough predictions, one's bound to hit, right?
Makes sense, like throwing darts blindfolded. Eventually one hits the board.
Pretty much. But beyond pure skepticism, there are psychological theories too, though it's maybe less formally studied.
Like what?
Psychiatrist Arthur Dykman talked about intuitive knowing, a kind of perception that bypasses the usual senses and logical thought. And sociologist Margaret Paloma saw prophecy as a bridge, connecting the individual's mystical side with the community's mystical side. She linked it to free association, maybe related to right brain activity.
And Julian Jaynes.
Yeah.
You mentioned him earlier, the bicameral mind. Can you unpack that a bit more in this context?
Sure. Jane's theory was pretty radical. He proposed that ancient humans didn't have consciousness like we do. Their minds were bicameral two chambers. One part generated these authoritative voices, which they experienced as external guides or spirits, and the other part just obeyed. He thought these gods were basically brain functions, parts of the nervous system. And maybe prophecy for later humans was like a temporary throwback, accessing that older mental state where guidance feels like an external voice.
Fascinating idea. Any others?
Joseph Chilton Pearce described revelation symbolically like a flash of insight, a lightning strike resulting from a buildup of resonant potential. And some modern cognitive psychology looks at things like pattern recognition and attention to understand how people process prophecy today, especially as traditional religion maybe holds less sway for some.
It's really a wide range of explanations.
What?
Now, as we start to wrap up, there's one more connection that seems really interesting, maybe unexpected. Poetry and prophecy.
Yeah, this is a fascinating thread. The link goes way back. For the ancient Greeks, prediction, prophecy, poetry, they were often tangled together. Prophecies were frequently given in verse.
And the word vates in Latin.
Exactly. It meant both poet and prophet. Both were seen as getting inspiration from outside themselves.
Was this just a Western thing?
No, not at all. In ancient China, too, divination results were often expressed poetically. And even though we tend to separate theological revelation and poetry in the West today, the sources suggest they're still seen as kind of symbiotic, shared origins, aims, purposes.
So it's not just ancient history. We still see echoes.
Oh, absolutely. You can trace it in English literature. Middle English political poems often had that prophetic end of times feel. Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain includes the famous prophecies of Merlin.
Yeah, and William Blake.
Right. In the 18th century, Blake deliberately revived prophecy as poetry in works like America, a prophecy. And even today, you find contemporary American poets, Dana Gioia, Eileen Myles, Robert Frost had that line about prophets prophesying as mystics.
The commentators really by statistics.
Right. Carl Dennis, Richard Wilbur, Derek Walcott. They all engage with prophecy or prophets in their work. It suggests this enduring connection, maybe a shared way of trying to articulate deep truths or insights.
Wow. We have covered so much ground today, really, from the basic definitions, the ancient roots, exploring it across the Baha'i faith, Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
Then beyond the traditional frameworks, Native American traditions, China, Nostradamus.
Right, and then digging into the skeptical and psychological explanations, and finally landing on this really cool connection with poetry.
And I think the key takeaway really isn't just about belief versus disbelief. It's about appreciating that prophecy, in all its forms, is this incredibly profound and, well, persistent part of human culture and consciousness.
Yeah.
It connects history, faith, psychology, even art. It really shines a light on our ongoing search for meaning, for foresight, for some kind of connection to something bigger.
That's a great way to put it. So, as a final thought for everyone listening, maybe consider how that human desire to understand the future, or maybe just to believe there's a guiding message out there, how powerful that remains in our lives.
Yeah, whether you see it as divine or psychological or creative expression.
What does the sheer persistence of prophecy in all these different shapes and sizes tell us about ourselves? About that enduring human fascination with the unknown? Something to definitely ponder.